Right, right. So over the last couple of days, I've been like seeing on Twitter the old tier list has made a revival of some sort. You know, it's kind of come back. People are doing the tier list of Final Fantasy games, and I figured let's get involved. But then at the same time, I figured why not make a video out of it? Why not give my reasoning? And another reason that I want to do this now is because I'm playing through the whole franchise again on stream. That is the plan. So, I want to see if my opinions change a little bit because, like Final Fantasy IX, when I was younger, when I first played it back in like 1999, I think it was, I didn't enjoy it as much. It was good, it was an enjoyable Final Fantasy. It was slightly better than Final Fantasy VIII, in my opinion, at that point, but it wasn't anywhere near 7. Replaying it as a bit, you know, as an adult, playing it when I'm a bit older, Jesus Christ, Final Fantasy IX is, yeah, it's well up there. Well up there. So I want to see if my opinions have changed on some games. We'll get into which games when we get a little bit later on. Now, I have already played 1 and I'm near the end of 2, so then probably not going to change that much, but we'll see. We will see. So, don't forget, hit the like button, drop a subscribe on the channel, do all the things. Well, let's get on with it. So, starting off, we've got Final Fantasy 1. Now, Final Fantasy 1, and I'm judging this on everything. I'm not just judging it on story, I'm not just judging it on gameplay, I'm judging it on the complete package of the most recent version that I've played. So with Final Fantasy 1, the Pixel Remaster, story-wise, it's pretty basic. It really is a basic story, and system-wise, in every way, it's very basic. It shows that it's the first one in the franchise, but I don't think that necessarily makes it bad. I had quite a fun time playing Final Fantasy 1 again. So, some of these ranks may change as different things go into different positions, you know, when we rearrange things a little bit. But for now, I'm going to put Final Fantasy 1 solidly in B tier. I think that's a sensible thing to do. It'll probably end up being one of the lower ranked games in B tier, but we'll put it there for now. And we come to Final Fantasy 2. Final Fantasy 2 is weird. Narratively, it's better than 1. The story in Final Fantasy 2 is better than the story in Final Fantasy 1. There's more of like an empire, there's a resistance, there's all that sort of thing. You've got some pretty catastrophic stuff that goes down in 2. So, I'd say the story is better than 1's, but as far as the gameplay goes, like I like the way that you level up your skills and things like that. Like everything that you do in Final Fantasy 2, you gain your levels by using skills, but your weapons only get better by using your weapons. Your magic only gets better by using that specific magic. I like that side of it, but the encounter rate is it's too much. Like every 5 or 6 steps, bam, fight, bam, fight. Like it's really quite painful. And I can see why it's got that encounter rate, and that's because, you level up your skills by using them in combat. So they want to give you as many opportunities to level up your skills in combat, because you don't get XP. Well, I mean, you do get XP, but it's not overall XP. Like, you don't get XP, go from level 10 to 11 and get stat boosts. No, the more you use magic in fights, the more your magic XP goes up, and then eventually you'll get a level on it. So giving you more opportunities to do combat does make sense. It turns the game into an absolute grind fest. So because of that, I'm going to put it in C. Because I don't think it is as good as 1. I think 1 is the better game out of the 2. I do genuinely feel like 1 is better. 2's story is better. Its mechanics are interesting. But the experience is absolutely killed by the encounter rate. The world map music in the Pixel Remaster is, so good. And then we come to Final Fantasy 3, and Final Fantasy 3 falls very much into the same sort of category as Final Fantasy 2 for me at the minute. I am looking forward to playing it again because I've not played 3 for a very long time. But my memory of it is, it was about the same as Final Fantasy 2. Those two kind of sat in the same sort of category. My impression of 2 is better now than it was back then. So you never know, I might have the same sort of thing with 3 and we could see it bump up to here maybe in the future. But for now, and to be fair, would it be there? Because I'm going to rank it left to right as well. So like the better one in each category will be on the left hand side. No, I think 2 is slightly better than 3, but we'll see how that holds up. Now Final Fantasy 4 is an interesting one. 4 and 5 give me struggles because I really enjoyed 5. And 5 always seems to kind of get pushed lower down the rankings quite a bit. 4 always sits above it. Now, I don't know, I kind of see them in the same sort of place, like lower A class, upper B class maybe. That's where I'm kind of putting them. So I'm kind of thinking, if I go with, I'm thinking 4 there. Now, the after years, Final Fantasy IV, the after years, I've not played that. So I do need to get around to that. So that is the first one that goes into the not played category. And then with Final Fantasy V, it's definitely better than Final Fantasy 1, 100%, but I don't think it's good enough to get into the A tier. It is a fun game, I enjoyed it greatly, but I don't think it pushes up into that, you know, that A tier Final Fantasy ranking for me. So yeah, it can sit at the top of B tier for now, and we'll see what else goes in there. We'll see what other additions B tier gets. Now the next ones are pretty easy for me. This is where we get to like the golden age of Final Fantasy for me. So you're going to see a lot of top rankings given out here. So Final Fantasy VI, easy S class, not even a question, no conversation to be had about it. It is a top tier Final Fantasy game in my opinion. The pixel remaster is going to be insane. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, Final Fantasy VI, man, S tier. And I might as well just loop, because that's a thing as well. Final Fantasy VII, S tier. Like, there's not really a Final Fantasy game that beats it in my opinion. Like, it's going there and it's staying there. It isn't moving. You can argue that 6 and 9 are potentially more refined Final Fantasy experiences, but for me, 7 is a very refined Final Fantasy experience. It's a fun game, it's got a great story, and it was my first. So it's obviously top of the list, 100%. Now, Final Fantasy VIII, man, it's a good game. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot more when I was younger. Like 9 and 8 have kind of flipped a little bit for me. Younger me enjoyed 8 a lot. And was, yeah, 9's good. I could see that it was better than 8, but I enjoyed 8 more if I'm being completely honest. Now, it's a bit different. Not much, a little bit different. I would not put 8 in the S tier. It is undoubtedly the weakest of the golden age of Final Fantasy. Maybe 10. I know a lot of people will be fuming about that, but yeah, I think 10's better than 8. I think 10 is better than 8. So 8 for me, it's gonna go in the top of A class because I absolutely love it. I think it's a great game, but I can see that it's not good enough to sit in that very top tier, and a few people are going to disagree about that. I know that 8 is one of the most hated games, along with 2 and 13 and 15. Do you know what I mean? But I'm a fan. Personally, I am a fan. And the next obvious S tier game, A tier? No, S tier game is Final Fantasy IX. This is where it gets a little bit tough. 6 or 9 in second place. I think it's going to stay like that. I think 6 is going to keep it. It's real close though. That's actually pretty tough. Personally, I think that depending on my mood on any given day, these two could probably just swap around freely as second and third best Final Fantasies. And I'm going to be honest, that is my top 3 right there. 7, 6 and 9. Like, you ain't getting better than that in the Final Fantasy franchise. Just isn't happening. It just isn't happening. So, yeah. Now, 10, I'm still going to say, ooh, is it still an S tier game? Does it get into that S tier for me? The combat system was absolutely banging. Like, the combat system in 10 is, oof, 10-2 as well for that matter. Like, both of them have got phenomenal combat systems. The end game in 10's really good. See, the big complaint about 10 is that it's quite linear. And yeah, it is pretty linear, but so are most of the games, if we're being completely honest. 15 is probably the only one that you could really say is open world. Yes, you run around on a world map, but the journey that you take for the most part in all of the games is quite linear. You know, there's not the freedom to go and do whatever you want at any time. And I suppose 15's the same. 15 is linear in its narrative. And certain sections of it, like I believe it was chapter 13. I think it's chapter 13, where you're running through all those corridors. And anyway, we'll get to 15 later. But yeah, 10, it is linear, but it doesn't detract from the game, in my opinion. There's enough going on, there's enough character, there's enough narrative, quality. Yeah, I'm going to put it in there. It's the lowest of the S tier for me, and I think that is the end of the S tier for me. Like, I'm questioning whether or not I should move 10 down to there. as the undoubted top A-tier game at that point, I'm going to be nice. I'm going to give 10 some love. We're going to give 10 some love. We are going to give Final Fantasy X a bit of love. Now, Final Fantasy X-2, I didn't really like Final Fantasy X-2 when it came out, purely because it kind of... 10 was a good standalone story to finish where it was, I thought. That's how I felt about it. Like, 10's narrative was done. Perfect. Leave it alone. That's good. That's a quality story. It's compelling. It's interesting. It does everything that you want it to do. I'm happy with it. It's got a good end, it's got a good post game with the Dark Aeons and Penance and the Battle Arena and everything like that. So if you do want more Final Fantasy X, you can go back into it and smash the back out of it. But yeah, X-2 didn't do it narratively for me. Gameplay-wise, completely different matter. It was absolutely phenomenal gameplay-wise. And that's what's going to drag it probably to lower A class or upper B class for me. I'm going to put it in the upper B for now. I'm going to put it in upper B class. But I am looking forward to replaying Final Fantasy X-2 and seeing if my opinion on it shifts a little bit. Especially with all the talk of X-3 maybe being a thing. Are we going to have to redo this one day and add Final Fantasy X-3? Who knows? 11? Not played it. Not interested in it. Wasn't at the time, at the very least. Didn't really do online gaming on my PS2 at any point, and I've not gone back to it. I know it's on PC at the minute. I think you can access it via PC, but I'm just not interested. So yeah, I've not played that. Final Fantasy 12. And I'm going to go off the Zodiac Age, the most recent version of it. Is it the Zodiac Age? Yeah, I think it's called the Zodiac Age. But the most recent version, the remaster of it. That's the one that I'm going to go with. And if I'm being honest, it probably fits in, for me, personally, about there. I enjoy it more than 4 and 5, and 10 too, obviously, but 8 sits above it for me as far as enjoyment factor goes. It was a weird change. It was just a bit weird. The story suffers because of some of the character choices, like who's the main character and things like that. The combat system, it was the beginning of that stripping away of control, as far as I'm concerned, in the combat system. You could just set it up to auto battle, basically. And yeah, you had to know how gambits worked and set it up properly and everything like that. But once you'd done that, and it kind of killed it a little bit. The story was the main problem. It was a good story that was hampered by a few bad choices, in my opinion. It could have been so much better. Like if they'd have just run with Bash or Ash as the main characters, rather than shoehorning Varnid. Yeah, it hurts the game, in my opinion. It stops it reaching the pinnacle of a Final Fantasy game for me, but it is still a solid game. It's got a good story. The new version of it is phenomenal. Like, compared to the old version, it's so much better. So much better. So yeah, I'm going to pop that in there. Slightly worse than 8. Slightly. I'm not saying there's night and day differences between the two. Slightly. Revenant Wings, didn't play. Never played Revenant Wings. So yeah, can't really say anything about that. I will try and get it. I think it was on the DS. I think it was on the DS. I will try and get a hold of it in some way. I don't really know that much about DS emulation. I've not really looked into it, so we'll see. Oh, good. The fun bit. The 13. I'm just going to put it there. I'm just going to leave it there. That's where it deserves to be. I do not like Final Fantasy 13. The characters aren't interesting. Story isn't particularly interesting. There's potential in it. Don't get me wrong, there is definitely potential in 13's story. But it just never resonated with me. It never clicked with me. I hate the characters. It's just bad. It's just no. I'm not a fan. I am not a fan of Final Fantasy 13. It's difficult for me to call any Final Fantasy a bad game in general, but 13 comes the closest by a considerable distance, in my opinion. 13-2, on the other hand, 13-2 was pretty fun. It wasn't like, oh my god, what an amazing Final Fantasy. But going into it with the expectations that I had from Final Fantasy 13 of, oh god, what have they done? 13-2 was alright. It gets a bit weird, it gets a bit convoluted with the whole time travel thing and the different realities and all that business. But there's some fun stuff in that game. There is some absolutely brilliantly fun stuff. Mechanically, quite fun. The battle system's not the best in the 13 series, in my opinion, but 13-2 is by far the best of the 13 trilogy. As for where it lives, I would say out there, maybe there. That feels better. It feels better putting it as a top C class game. It's not. I don't think I enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed 1. I had a lot of fun playing Final Fantasy 1. Granted, recency bias, I played it like 2 or 3 weeks ago, so it's fresher in my mind. We are playing through the whole franchise, so I am going to be playing 13, 13-2, and Lightning Returns. Oh, so we'll see. We'll see if that changes. I'm pretty confident that 13-2 will stay where it is. I'm pretty confident 13's definitely going to stay where it is. And as for Lightning Returns, I'm going to be reasonable here. I've played it. I've not completed it, and I've not played it much. Played it at a mate's house. I was considering getting it, but after 13, and after everything that we heard about the changing of the mechanics and things like that with Lightning Returns, I didn't jump in. So I'm going to put it in the not played category for now. I'm going to put it there. Just purely because I don't think I've played enough of it. Like, I literally sat down with it for like 15-20 minutes. That was it. So I don't think I've played enough of it to make a judgment. I expect it's probably going to be there or there, judging off what I've A, played, and B, seen and read on YouTube and things like that. But I'm not going to judge it because I've not, you know what I mean? Feels a bit mean. And let's be fair, I already dunk on Lightning enough anyway, so I don't need to add more fuel to the fire. This is where you all hate me. Well, not all of you. So, Final Fantasy 14. It really is a game of two halves, football reference if you get it. But it really is, and I wouldn't even say two even halves. I'd say like 60 or 70% of the game is like C tier, D tier, in my opinion. And then there is like 10-20% that pushes A tier. Like the end of Shadowbringers, like 5.3, man, Jesus. But we need to judge the whole game as one, because that's what it is. It is one whole game. We're not splitting this up by expansion. If I was splitting it up by expansion, it'd probably be Realm Reborn, D tier, top D tier, better than 13 by a long way. Let's not fuck about it. Heaven's Ward, I'd give it C tier. I don't know if it'd be higher than 13-2 though. Maybe. Like, Heaven's Ward has moments that are brilliant, but it's like 15% of the overall expansion. So that other 85%, not fun. It's not fun. So is that. Stormblood would definitely be upper C tier, maybe lower B tier, maybe even lower B tier. Maybe at moments it pushes up into like the higher B tier, but it's fleeting. It's quite fleeting moments, and most of it seems to be in the post game. You know, the really good stuff. It seems to be in there. A lot of it, yeah, it's world building. It fleshes out the world of Eorzea, and it does an alright job of it, but it's just a drag. To experience it, it is a drag. So, and then Shadowbringers, like, again, big chunks of it are B tier, bits of it are high A tier, lower S tier. So it probably averages out to like mid A tier for me. But that's if I was breaking it down. I've not played Endwalker yet. I've not played the finale of the saga. I am going to get around to that. I don't know if it's going to be part of my playthrough on stream. Maybe. We'll see about that. I don't know. We'll see about that. But yeah, at the minute, at the end, I've finished Shadowbringers, I've finished all the post-game. Where I am at the minute, I am going to put Final Fantasy 14, and this is where people get triggered. I'm going to put it there, at the top of B tier, and that's being generous. That's trying not to get flamed. That is me trying not to get flamed, I'll be honest. I don't like MMOs, really, hence me not really ever playing Final Fantasy 11. They're not my... You know, it's not my genre. I don't enjoy the gameplay that much. When you get later on into it, like when you get into Shadowbringers, yeah, your rotation's enough to keep you busy and keep you engaged in the combat. But that's right at the very end of the game. And this is what I mean, like the quality is there in Shadowbringers. Like the quality is definitely there. But the amount of dredge that you just utter shit that you have to go through to get there, it drags the whole package down, in my opinion. So, yeah, upper B tier for Final Fantasy 14. Oh, and then we come to 15. Now, my issues with 15, dominantly business related. Like, I hate what they did with 15. I truly hate the way that they did 15. It was one game, one story, and then they chopped it up and sold it off as different things. and it killed the game. It hollowed the game out. Like that game, I played it on release. It was a husk. It was just an empty husk. It was really bad. Especially when you get to that moment where you wake up and everyone's looking at a newspaper, and then it cuts to a couple of clips from Kingsglaive, and then that's it. Oh, everything's gone. Everything's been ruined. We're done. We need to save the world. It's like, what? So if you didn't watch Kingsglaive, big chunks of that story were missing. Big chunks of it. Absolutely gargantuan chunks of it were missing. With all the DLC, and if you've watched Kingsglaive, it's a reasonably enjoyable experience. Reasonably enjoyable. Which brings me to the question, where do I put it? And it's tough. Because it's better than 13. It is better than 13. Oh, no, not there. Oh, it's stuck there now, right, I have to keep hold of it. I'm going to have to keep hold of it now, so it's doing a dance. It's in movement, like chess. Now, it could go there. It is considerably better than 13. Its story feels better if you know it. If you don't know it, it goes there. Like, if you literally just play the base Final Fantasy 15, don't watch Kingsglaive, don't get any of the DLC like the Prompto, Ignis, Gladiolus, or add-in DLCs. If you don't get any of that, it sits there. It has to sit there, if that's the case, because it is an empty story. It truly is. Like, 13 at least has more going on than 15. Now, if you've played all the DLC, and you watched Kingsglaive, it's definitely better than 13, definitely better than 3, and it's definitely better than 2. I would be loath to put it above 13 too, because I don't think, given the business practices, I can justifiably put it at the top of any class other than D. But I'll be fair, and I'll put it there. I enjoyed 13.2 more anyway, just as a standalone experience. If you chop everything else out and just judge 13.2 against 15, 13.2 was more fun. So yeah, 15 can live there. So that's the tier list so far. There are a couple of other games that I want to add in. I've been lazy and I've not added them in as images, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add them onto the screen now via the magic of editing, and it's going to be the rest of the compilation. Now, Before Crisis, not played. I've just not played it, so it goes in the not played list. I will hopefully try and get around to it. I know there are RPG Maker versions of Before Crisis out there. We also have Ever Crisis coming, which should involve, which will include Before Crisis in some capacity. Don't know how they're going to do it. I assume it's going to be very similar to how it was back then, episodic, because the whole thing seems like it's going to be an episodic release thing. So Before Crisis fits into that. So I will get round to it, 100%. Oh, Crisis Core. This is probably going to piss a few people off as well, actually, now that I think about it. Crisis Core, I am going to put better than everything lower than 13.2. Better than 1. Oh, is it better than 5? That's pretty tough. And you know what? Now that I'm looking at it as well, I'm swapping them two around. I enjoyed 5 more. If I'm being honest, I enjoyed 5 more. But I need to replay 10.2 just so that I can judge it properly, because it was the narrative things that kind of threw me off a little bit when I was younger. I was 16, 17, I think, at the time when 10.2 dropped. So and I've not played it since. So it's been a very long time. And going along with that, I would probably put Crisis Core in between the two, possibly. In between 5 and 10.2. It did some weird, it did some weird stuff. It definitely did some weird stuff. I wasn't the biggest fan of the combat. Like, I didn't like the, is it the DMV or whatever it's called? No, I wasn't a fan of that. Yeah. It was just fun to get fleshing out on that backstory and those events that went down back then. But I mean, they even injecting Genesis into the reactor scene. Like, no. Like, none of that should have been allowed. Like, so yeah, that Crisis Core's hindered by a few things, in my opinion. It was nice. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed getting the fleshing out of the world, but it also did some pretty unforgivable stuff in certain points. And if it wasn't related to 7, my favourite game of all time, it'd probably be in C tier as well. But because it's got that connection to 7 and you're learning more about characters that you've already got a pre-existing connection to, it bumps it up a little bit as far as my overall enjoyment goes. And that's what this ranking is, remember. This isn't what is the best Final Fantasy, unequivocally, like factually. It's not one of them. It's what's my favourite, which ones did I enjoy the most. So yeah, at the minute, I would say Crisis Core sits in between 5 and 10-2. I am probably going to replay it, I'm probably going to hate it, and it's probably going to move Crisis Core even further down, we'll see. But then the next one is Dirge of Cerberus. And Dirge of Cerberus, it's a pretty bad game. It is a pretty bad game. I would probably sit it between 15 and 2. If I'm being honest with you, I'd probably sit it in there. But the gameplay choices were silly. Like, make it an RPG. Come on. Come on, man. Just make it an RPG. Don't mess about. Just do the thing that you do. Don't make a third-person shooter or any of that business. No. No. Do what you do. So, yeah, Dirge of Cerberus probably sits in there for me. And then, finally, we got Final Fantasy VII Remake. Now, with Final Fantasy VII Remake, I'm not going to lie, quite a big fan of it. It was enjoyable. There's some weird stuff going on. You know my opinions on it if you watch the channel. It's a sequel. So I'm kind of looking forward to where it goes. At the minute, with the lack of overall context that we've got, I'd probably put it in upper 8 tier. At the very least, it's between 8 and 12. It's probably... yeah, it probably is the top of the 8 tier Final Fantasy VII Remake for me. I don't... Final Fantasy VIII, though, I did have a lot of fun with Final Fantasy VIII. I think provisionally, it's going to be in the middle between Final Fantasy VIII and Final Fantasy XII. Because 8, I had a lot of fun with it. There's a lot of nostalgia there for it. It's a complete experience. With 7 Remake, we still don't know where the story's going. So I kind of don't... I don't know how I'm going to do Remake. Am I going to add each installment, or am I going to treat the Remake as an overall... Because if I'm treating Remake as an overall entity, then I just kind of need to chill on Remake. At the minute, I'd say it's between 8 and 12. We'll see where it goes. And I'm not doing Advent Children. Advent Children don't count for shit. But yeah, that is my Final Fantasy tier list. I think that's a pretty solid list. I'm going to try and play all of the bottom row, the not played row, except 11. I'm just not. It's just not happening. I'm not doing it. So that is perpetually going to stay not played by me. It's just, no, I'm not. I can't be asked. But Final Fantasy IV, the After Years, I'm going to try and get onto that and try and play that. Revenant Wings, going to try and play that. I need to figure out DS emulation, but we'll try and make it happen. And Lightning Returns, I'm going to play more than 20 minutes of it and try and... I'll try... This is it. I'm playing through all of them, so I'm completing all of them. So by that, I have to finish Lightning Returns. Oh. Well, yeah, thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to drop your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me your tier list. Tag me on Twitter. Go to Tiermaker. You know, do your thing. You know, make your own tier list. That's what this is all about. It's opinions. I'd be disappointed in you if your top tier doesn't match my top tier exactly, but you know, that's me. Who cares about me? Please do drop a like on the video and subscribe for future content. It helps the channel grow. We're trying to get to 1K, so... Well, yeah, more importantly than anything, have a great day.